when Andrew Migliore had the H.P. Lovecraft Festival, where Bernie Wrightson and I were kind enough to get Lifetime Achievement Awards, and boy, what a renovation here, huh? I mean, let's give it up for whatever this whole organization is. Incredible, outside and inside. So I'm blown away by all of you, and thank you for coming, and thank you, the man himself, who made all this happen. This is fantastic. Thank you.
It's such an honor to have you. Thank you so much. Yeah, Richard and I met 20 years ago at the H.P. Lovecraft Fest. I'll never forget it because Bernie, when he accepted his speech, used his 5 minutes on stage to denounce war. And he said something, I'm going to badly paraphrase it, but he said, you know, I depict horror in my artwork, but the real horror in the world is war. And it moved me so much. I'll never forget that night. And it happens to be the night you and I first met 20 years ago. And here we are. You're back on stage. And it happens to also be National Video Store Day, which is, so I want to give a shout out to Movie Madness. That experience that I described in my intro, those of you who were here when I introduced the movie, I talked about walking on foot, you know, a pretty long distance back in 1986 to rent these movies. And that experience that I had, looking at shelves of films, and they always had the horror section, you know, they had the heavy stuff on the top shelf, so it was like Faces of Death and Camp Holocaust. You couldn't even reach it, it was almost like pornographic, you know. You felt gross when you walked up with I Spit on Your Grave and somebody rented it to you. You can still have that experience at Movie Madness. And I encourage you to do so. And it's that experience is why I wanted to open an art gallery like 35 years later. Like that, the video store experience is like being in a museum or a well-curated show. It's really important. But tonight we have Richard Band on hand, and I want to, why don't you start out just by telling us what you remember? No, let's go all the way back. Let's go back to your beginning. You were, as I just told them, you were born into a film family. Your father.
Yeah, well, yeah, it is interesting because it's all my dad's fault. Let's just start right there. It's all his fault. My father was working with John Huston. First as an assistant, and then an editor, and then my father wrote the screenplay adaptation for The Red Badge of Courage for Houston, and so he developed a great relationship. But they had to part ways because Houston wanted him to go to Africa to shoot The African Queen, and but my father knew Houston well and knew that the main reason he wanted to go to Africa to shoot The African Queen is because he was an avid hunter and wanted to go shoot a bunch of animals. My father wasn't exactly into that, and he didn't feel like going to Africa, so they parted ways there. Of course, the film went something like 8 months over schedule. Several people got killed, a few died. It was, and Houston was off most of the time hunting. So I think it was, in one way, probably a good decision. So, and instead, we went, again, keep in mind I'm like 5 years old at the time, my brother's 7. My father took us to Sweden, where he shot Face of Fire, a beautiful film, ill-titled, I think. I mean, it doesn't matter today, but it's actually a really heartwarming film. It's a beautiful film. And after that, we spent almost a year in Sweden, and then we went, he took the family to Paris, and we lived in Paris for about a year. But at that time, there was a lot of stuff going on in Italy, and so he moved us to Italy, where we ended up staying for the next 12 years, or almost 12 years, because Rome had become what they called at the time the Hollywood of Europe. Now keep in mind, this is at the time when they were making all the spaghetti westerns, all the Hercules movies, and my father started doing those. So he did a lot of the westerns, a lot of the Hercules movies, and they were all American-Italian co-productions. And it was an incredible upbringing to be overseas in Italy, and the Italians are just wonderful and warm people. And especially at that time, during all the 60s, Americans were like celebrities anyway. It was just they loved the Americans. This isn't that long after the World War II. So it was a great existence over there. And again, since my father was making these movies, we went on location sometimes, and well, most of the time if it was in the summer. And when we came, I guess I was about 13 or 14, and my father had done a Western movie. And for the first time, I went to the scoring session. And so I'm at the scoring session, and again, I'm like 13 or something like that, but it was my first exposure to a whole orchestra playing music for my own father's film. I'm going, wow. I said, this just blew me away. And what I didn't know at the time, and I found out about a year or so later, is that there were 3 composers, but 1 lead composer. And that turned out to be Ennio Morricone. And so you look back at something like that, and again, I was told we were 13, I didn't have an appreciation of the whole art at that time, but it was without question one of the great influences in my life. So that's the history up until when we finally came back to this United States in 1971. And my father kept making films, and my brother got into the filmmaking business, and lo and behold, I said, no, not my thing, and I went off to music school and studied music for about 3 years, and did not like academia at all, and just jumped out of that and went into learning production, film production and all that. But after a year or so, I'm saying, this is all good, I'm good in all this, but I gotta go back to my roots. And I went on a holiday back to Europe, and I'll never forget this. It was one of those things that just happens. I'm sitting on a beach in Europe going, what am I gonna do with my life? What am I gonna do? I mean, I love movies, I was brought up in the movies, but I love music, and what am I gonna do? And then like the little proverbial bubble went off. I said, what about music for movies? What a brilliant idea. I am so brilliant. So I came back to the United States, and within a year, again, we're going back to 1976 or 7, and I had made friends with Joel Goldsmith, who was the son of the famous Jerry Goldsmith. Joel was quite a bit younger than I, but he was doing sound production for films at the time. But with that musical gene in him and my desire, we got together and did our very first, and found a way to get in and convince people to let us do the music for what turned out to be our first film that we co-composed called Laser Blast. And we were just so taken with the opportunity, to do that. And it had a huge budget of us for $1,000 for the whole score.
Did you have like 10 days or something?
I don't even remember. It was an absurd, 10 days or 2 weeks schedule and all of this stuff. But regardless of that, we did the score, and it was quite well received. Of course, this was the year 6 months earlier, Star Wars had come out, and so there was a good splash for us. And the next 42 years, I've been screwing around and doing it ever since. So there you go.
That's probably, you answered like 15 of my questions. And we just got the warning that we get hooked off. So we're going to continue this conversation.
Absolutely.
Right after Terrorvision. But can you very quickly set us up for Terrorvision? What do you remember about the next film we're going to watch?
Well, this is interesting. I'm talking from a musical standpoint here. I developed a good relationship with Ted Nicola, who was the director. In fact, I just did a little mini-series with him about a year ago called Don't Let Her In. That was on Amazon, and he's now shooting another iteration and new movie of the subspecies, which should be out probably within 6 months. And I know a lot of you know that movie and franchise as well.
This audience knows Dungeon Master.
Yeah.
Ted Nicolau directed a segment of Dungeon Master.
There's another one, that's right. So Terrorvision was a unique experience for me from a musical standpoint, because you have to keep in mind when you're listening to it and watching the movie, it's like it was a big departure. It's got a lot of kooky electronics in it and all that, but I wasn't an electronic guy at the time. And keep in mind, this was way before MIDI even existed, or QuickTime movies, or any of this stuff. So I brought on a couple of people who were good friends of mine who were better versed in the actual electronics, and came up with a device to create these musical templates, because this the whole movie has got this kooky, sort of funny or just weird music in it, and came up with like 15, 20 templates that we would use with all these electronics going on. But my thinking was always this, my thinking of scoring never really changed. It still has to be scored, it still has to accomplish the same things for a film. But the mechanisms had changed drastically, and it's just a very fun, crazy score, crazy movie. I love this movie. To this day, I think it's a great movie. It's hilarious, and it foretold a lot, actually, of the way things have come down with technology. But I just love it, and the whole coloring of the movie. I think most of you have probably seen it, and you'll see it again tonight. The colors that jump out at you is like it's almost otherworldly in a way, but in such a funny, kooky sense. So it's a real fun one. I won't go into it more because you guys want to watch it and listen to me. They'll have fun.
Melinda, let's do the damn thing. Roll Terrorvision, and ladies and gentlemen, we'll be back with Richard Band after this. Everybody, please give a warm welcome once again to international cinematic composer, Mr. Richard Band.
Thank you all for coming out tonight. Boy, I expected, 2 or 3 people, but gee whiz. I'm shocked that there's gambling going on, movies going on in this place.
And in case we don't have an opportunity to thank you all in the lobby after the film, on behalf of all of us at Wyrd War, let me give you all my deepest gratitude for showing up tonight. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you very much. Because if you don't show up, we'll just be back on our couch doing this like we've been doing it since the 80s, But this is a lot more fun for us. Give it up one more time for our sponsor, Blood, Sweat, Tears Vodka, please. There's a lot to unpack with Terrorvision. I don't even know where to begin, really. But having Richard here is part of something of a series that we're doing. Years ago, I started doing a DJ series called The Sound of Fear, where I focused exclusively on movie soundtracks and scores. And in December, we're bringing Claudio Simonetti's Goblin out here, and we're showing Suspiria. I hope a lot of you got tickets. It's sold 2 nights. I booked them for 2 nights, and it sold out in 5 hours. So hopefully, did any of you get tickets? No! All right, see you in December. Those of you who didn't, I'm glad you're here tonight.
I'm on the wait list.
What's that?
I'm on the wait list.
Oh, Oh yeah, if anybody flakes, we'll get to you. You know they're gonna flake. Somebody's gonna have to work, bro. Don't worry. Yeah, we have a wait list. We have a wait list of like 100 people
I need to
for
get a
this.
ticket somehow. I need to get a ticket somehow.
Oh, don't worry about it, man. We got you.
Okay.
Anyway, the idea of this series is to highlight the people who provide the sort of invisible. I don't know, John Carpenter calls it the velvet glove that touches you. You don't even realize that the sound is actually affecting you the way that it does. But it's the thing that's guiding us emotionally through a movie, even like Troll, which, you know, tonight was a perfect example, watching it on a big screen, listening to the score. Hopefully you understood what I meant when I was describing the staircase scene and Richard's music just making that a magical occurrence. So, all of that is to say, Richard, what does music have to do with genre cinema?
Absolutely nothing. Well, you know what? Maybe Bernard Herrmann could sum it up. He was asked this question back in the day after he had done several of Hitchcock's movies, including Psycho, and he was an interesting character, kind of an angry man, and a genius, I think, in his own right, and did things that he had the balls to do things that nobody else would even try. And likewise, when asked that question, he says, well, music, I think, is at least 40% of the entire film. So, I won't say 40%, but how about 39? Fair enough? I think so. Well, it's, I mean, all kidding aside, I don't know if it's 40, and it depends on the film. Some films require a lot more than others and different approaches and all that, but it kind of is the soul of a film if you really think about it. I've always approached it from the standpoint of wanting to project not necessarily what you're seeing on the film, because what you're seeing is already there, and hearing and the dialogue and the characters. But I strive to project what's behind it all. The feelings, the motivations, all those sorts of things, to get behind it. What's driving a person. I'll give you a simple example. Let's say you have a chase scene, two cars, right? And they're driving, chasing. Yeah, you could do the standard thing that you see in 100 TV shows and have, right? You could have that. Or maybe a better approach might be, what's driving the guy being chased or the person chasing? And maybe that person is totally not deranged, but sad and depressed. So maybe you want to go a whole other way and play it not typical chase music, but maybe you want to play that from his standpoint and make it a little somber or sad. A totally different approach. Again, it depends on what's behind the motivations that are presented on the screen. Because once again, you're seeing what's obvious in front of you, and you're hearing what's obvious in the dialogue, so music has to have some other function. So I think Bernard Herrmann, I think he was, I don't know, about 40%, but he was pretty right. Is that kind of an answer?
Yeah, I've heard you say that you had a third dimension to a two-dimension...
Yes, well, yes, definitely. I've said that in many interviews and articles. It is, we're dealing with a two-dimensional medium. That's what it is. And music, I do forget the fact that it's 3D movies, that's visual. But it's a two-dimensional medium.
Metal Storm, the destruction of Jared Sin that he did the score for.
That's right, or Parasite.
In 3D, Parasite.
Exactly. So it is the third dimension. I believe it is the third dimension in a two-dimensional medium. That's what I think, and I always, like I said, I strive to go beyond, from beyond what's there.
A beautiful example of that, what you're you're describing is one of my favorite scores of yours. I've been talking to a lot of you about it. Is The House on Sorority Row,
Right.
which is a pretty typical slasher movie in a lot of ways. Your score is one of the most beautiful, lush orchestral scores of the entire decade, and you elevate that movie to this whole nother level, and it's actually not a scary score at all.
No, it's not. It's scary, and it's just in its sort of simplicity, actually. You know, very simple themes. There's a lushness about it, and that was at a time where most slasher movies were being done with hokey synthesizers and just weird effects and all that. And I just wanted to start taking another approach. I really believed, and this goes through my entire career, going back to the very first movies, that these, most of them say B movies, right? That if you really provided a really good soundtrack to them, it would just elevate the whole film, and people wouldn't write them off. This is a B movie. You know, there's so much good quality in a lot of these movies. Yes, some are hokey, some are this, some are that. You know, the minute you start saying in our business, oh well, you know, they didn't spend $150 million on this movie. It's you know, they only spent, you know, a couple of million. It's got to be crap. You know, it's this class warfare type crap almost, and it's not true. There's some of the best stuff by far is being done by independents on low budget things. That's why I
Earlier we were talking about this new show on Amazon Prime, Ring of Fire. Ring of Fire, and they made this film for about $1 billion. It was like 900 million, give or take. And I just want the audience to know that all three of the films, the Empire pictures that we have shown tonight, all three of them together were probably about 6 or 7 million. Okay, and to bring it back to what a score does for a film, all of your scores make low-budget films. I always call them low-budget because B film sounds a little insulting. They're just lower-budgeted films, but your music always makes them seem so expensive and big and cinematic. And these movies look like movies. So many movies, I mean, I'm an older guy, but movies nowadays don't look like movies to me frequently. These look like movies and they sound like movies, and I feel like that's your contribution.
Well, thank you. That was always the aim. That was the idea. That's what I wanted to accomplish, and every film was its own battle to get enough funds to do it the way I wanted. You know, I never got the exact amount I wanted, but I managed somehow to pull it together and get as many live instruments and sometimes symphonies and all that, and it elevates the whole product. It's that simple. And you know, it's unfortunate that a lot of films today, and you know, with the advent of streaming and Netflix and all these you know, streaming companies, there's a ton of product, and a lot of it, there's good product, but I personally have been very happy with the way things are being scored. A lot of just atmospheric drones and stuff. I'm like, that's kind of boring for me. Maybe I'm just an old fart here, you know.
Lots of old farts here today. Do you feel like the limit? It just occurred to me while you were talking. Do you feel like the limitation in budget somehow like pushes your creativity? Sometimes the limitation, it's like the old example.
Necessity is the mother of invention.
Yeah.
It always has been. Always has been, always will be.
To reference your old heroes,
There you go. That's Frank. That's right. You know. And you were just talking about like this new Amazon series, Ring of Fire, based on The Hobbit, the great several movies that Peter Jackson did. It just, I mean, 8 episodes at $469 million. Come on. I mean, you know, it's great. That's insanity, and it's not good. It's no good. I mean, it's boring, and you can't follow the characters, and you don't even care about that. I don't know.
And again, just for reference, about 2 million.
Yeah,
From
about
Beyond,
two and a half
maybe
million.
5-ish million. So
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. But it's always been a crazy business. You know, but yeah, necessity is the mother of invention. That is a fact. So you find a way to be creative with what you have, and constantly try to push the envelope. And that's what we do in independent filmmaking. Always try to push it, and that's why I've never liked doing bigger films, even though I've done 8 or 10 bigger films. I really don't want to have 12 executive producers breathing down my neck telling me how it should be done. You know, if you let me do my thing, if you hate it, throw it out, get somebody else. But that's kind of the way I feel. Maybe that's because I'm getting older now and I just don't have the patience. But I really don't want to deal like these TV shows with 12, 15 executive producers and all that. It's just.
We're running behind schedule, but I promised I'd open it to the audience. So let me get some questions from the audience. Yeah, right there.
So you talked about using the score to try to elevate the picture, and I wonder if there's anything that you were told on the score, where you sort of took a look at what you were handed, and you thought, oh my God, what is this thing? But you saw a genuine idea there, and you thought to yourself, I can save this. I can make this work. I can pull this out. And if so, did you succeed in your opinion?
Okay. I'll summarize it in an answer. I'm not sure it's the E answer, but it's an answer. I have to fall in love with the project that I'm doing. Otherwise, I just simply can't do it, even if it's a piece of shit. I'm kind of incapable of just, writing something off and just say, I'll just put some notes out there and it'll work and it'll be fine. I'm just not capable of that, and never have been. I have had scenarios where people have expected a certain way in a certain thing, and the advent of a lot of scoring these days, again because of technology in this case, a lot of the times, if not most of the time, if not now almost all the time, I'll get something and it's been tracked, from the producers or director and or editors with music that they would like to hear. Temp music, it's called temp music. They're temping it. So, they'll come to you and they'll have a movie and they'll put John Williams' Star Wars music in there and they go, make it something like that. Meanwhile, their budget is $4.34. Right? Yeah, right. So it's a constant fight, and it's something that happens more and more and more and more, and it's a problem. But getting more to what you asked, I've tried my best to find those moments in films, and I've succeeded most of the time, I think. But that's more of your judgment, not mine.
You succeeded. Yeah, you definitely succeeded, my friend.
Any more questions? There's quite a few. Right there in the middle, we don't have a light, but right there in the middle there.
Yeah.
I was just curious if you're able to see the film before you score it in these cases, or do you have to just know tonally what the scenes are in order to score them generally, or does it vary from film to film?
Yeah, well, in the old days, before the advent of a lot of this technology that we all have on our computers today, we have QuickTime movies, all this available stuff. But in the old days, for the first, 12 to 15 years I was working as a film composer, we didn't have the technology. Therefore, what would happen back then is we would look at the movie with the director and or producer, whoever the powers to be were, usually the director and producer, and you'd have a music editor with you, and you would decide where. So you look at the movie usually once, maybe twice if you were lucky, and you decide what scenes needed music, what sequences needed music. And then at that point, the music editor would go back and literally rewrite what we had discussed and detail, literally to the frame, everything that happened. So let's say a person at 2 minutes walks from here to there. So that would be down at 2 minutes, 2 seconds, and 4 frames, the person walks from left to right. At this point, this person does this. So you'd end up with 300-400 pages of music editor notes, all in time, which would tell you what's happening on the screen, because you didn't have it available. That's what you saw it once or twice. Then, at that point, from memory and from those notes, we would take the music, we would take our musical ideas and then start writing music and correlate those seconds and minutes to tempo. And there's a mathematical ways to do that, quite complicated. But that was like the first 12 or 15 years. Then technology came around, and today you have QuickTime, you have all these programs that automatically do all this for you. They'll figure out what tempos do so that you hit certain marks and all of that. So that's the way it is today. The technology has brought us very far as far as that's concerned. We always see the movie now to work. We always have it to work with now. In the past, like I said, you saw it maybe once or twice, you had those notes, and that was it. But it's all different today.
Thank you.
Sure. There was some music in Troll. There were some elements of the score to Troll that you actually did before they filmed, and they actually filmed.
Yeah, well, that's not unusual to have happen. If you have a sequence in a film where where they're singing a song, let's say just a musical, it doesn't have to be Troll, just any musical, obviously that song has to be written before they film it so they can sing to it. So then you've written the song and they do a playback, they play it back as you're filming, so that it syncs up later on. That's all it really is. And yes, Troll, the song in there with the herb away and all that stuff, that was all recorded 2-3 months before they ever started shooting. So that's not uncommon that happens. But all the post scoring that don't involve songs or stuff like that, that's done at the very end.
For like one more, because we got to start the next movie, and there's no light on you, so I can't see if anybody's. Yeah, that long hand. Yeah, that one right there.
That long hand?
That long arm right there. Yeah, go for it.
This one right here. Okay, so Richard, you spoke really beautifully about the mathematical compositions of music and how they impact the tempo and various other aspects of horror. I'm really curious about the other multi-sensory aspects of horror films and how those influence the ways that you compose horror movies, because I feel that the most salient moments in horror movies are when the multi-sensory efforts of the film, like visual, audio, and otherwise, all come together. And how does your role as a composer make those roles come together seamlessly?
Okay, that's not something I can answer in a minute, but
You have to start the movie. Damn.
no, you're very astute in the question, because that is the balance as an artist that you try to find. And I've always said, like you quoted me in film music being the third dimension of a two-dimensional medium. I've also always said that for me, the first note of music is silence. And especially in genre films, you need to be very sensitive to where no music might be more effective than music. Therefore, if you can bring it in the right places, and this has to do with what we call music spotting. Spotting is simply deciding where music should be or should not be. And if you do it correctly, the music has a reason to come in. But if it's only coming in, you know, just to be effective by itself, it usually doesn't work, in my opinion. So that ties in very much to kind of what you're talking about, how to utilize it so that those elements, those three elements that you just referred to, how they do come together. That's part of the art form. That's what it is. Does that kind of answer it?
Yeah.
That's a quick answer.
Okay.
It's also a really good segue into From Beyond, because when I
Talking about
introduced
sensory, that's right. There you go.
all three elements are at play here. We've got a synth score, we've got an orchestral score, the resonator, sound design,
And that pineal gland.
and
Right.
Barbara Crampton and Bond
And Barbara
Engineer.
Crampton, that's right. I mean, all those sensory things come together in this movie, doesn't it?
So, set us up for From Beyond. What do you remember about working on this score?
Well, this was a great score to work on. It won me the Best Score of the Year award at the Stitches Barcelona Film Festival. It probably one of my best scores as far as string usage, because it has some very unusual stuff combined with some samplers and synthesizers. But there's a good example of how I try to marry sensuality and sexuality in another dimension. And that's basically what the film is kind of about. The pineal gland, the resonator, all this has to do with sensory perception and feeling and all that. And I felt there were certain scenes that it definitely had to come out. It had to be very sensual for it to work, like the whole sort of sexy scene with Barbara Crampton dressed up in the outfit and all this, where she's getting hotter and hotter and all that. You know, a lot of people would have scored that, like, give me a saxophone. Oh my God, can't do that, right? So it had to be a whole different approach for that, and the resonator had to be its own character as well. So there are a lot of dimensions to that film, and it's definitely to this day probably in my top 10 of ones that I've done that I really like, and apparently a few other people do as well. Oh yeah, very, very simple. You just visit my website, which is richardbandmusic.com, and there's a store there. There's also gallery pictures, a lot of different things, news, contact, all this sort of stuff. So www.richardbandmusic.com, and there's, I don't know, 70 CDs and soundtracks rather on LPs, CDs, and so forth. And whenever anything comes out, I always, place it on there. And so that's the place to go if you want more.
Richard, I just want to tell you once again, you're a hero of mine. It's a deep honor to have you on stage. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you.
Everybody who showed up tonight, thank you very, very much.
Yeah, I'm overwhelmed by all of you, and how you've been so gracious and supportive, and you're what it's all about. Yeah, really, it's without the quote-unquote fan base, what are we doing this for? This is all so that we can enjoy these films and participate, and you are invaluable, so never forget that.
Woo! Thank you.
And you got about 5 minutes minutes to meet Richard. We're going to start the film right now. But will you take him on to the merch table so we can meet people? Yeah. So I promised earlier, I don't know if you noticed, John Beekler did the effects for Terrorvision as well. And I told you I had a secret surprise, so put this in your calendar, people. You'll be the first to know. Friday, January 13th, 2023, we're going to show John Beekler's film, Friday the 13th, Part 7, here at the Hollywood Theater with Kane Hodder as our special guest. And we haven't announced it. The Hollywood Theater doesn't even know this yet. Nobody knows this yet except for you all, because you're the troopers who lasted all the way to From Beyond. So give yourselves a round of applause. And do me a favor, when these tickets go on sale, please don't let it sell out without you being here, because I want all of you to be here on Friday the 13th with Kane Hodder. All right? And now, give it up for Richard Van.